At 7:42 a.m., 12th September 1945, Camp 22d, Harperley, County Durham, logged the arrival of 37 German female auxiliaries from disbanded Luftwaffe communication units. British intelligence had projected minimal operational value from captured Helferinnen personnel. The September intake report noted low technical retention expected among auxiliary staff, yet within 72 hours, one prisoner would decode transmissions that identified a coordinated sabotage cell operating inside the British occupation zone. The disconnect between assessment and capability would reshape protocols across northern command sectors. A wireless operator's log, preserved in Durham archives, recorded the convoy's arrival with a single notation: transport delayed, fog persisted through dawn. What the log did not capture was the moment exhausted German women stepped onto British soil and realised their assumptions about their captors had been shaped by years of false propaganda. At 7:46, the fog lifted enough for Corporal Thomas Aldridge to observe the women clearly. He held a clipboard listing their documented specialties: Luftnachrichten signals operators, Flakwaffe auxiliary crews, radar technicians from collapsing defensive networks. Their uniforms, faded blues and patched greys, hung loose on frames thinned by retreat and surrender. Thomas had served as a Royal Navy Fleet air arm mechanic before transfer to guard duty. He understood technical precision. He recognised exhaustion. The intake manifest identified them simply as female POW, non-combatant auxiliary. Security assessment, minimal threat. One woman stumbled near the lorry's rear gate. She stood taller than Thomas by perhaps an inch, with sharp features and the rigid bearing of someone accustomed to military discipline. Her name tag, partially torn, read F. Köhler, Nachrichtenhelferin, Signals Corps. She steadied herself against the vehicle's canvas side. Thomas stepped forward, training guiding his response. "You all right, miss?" His accent, softened by coastal upbringing, seemed to surprise her more than the question itself. I'm fine," she answered in uncertain English. Her gaze moved past him to the other guards, then swept the compound perimeter. Around her, women whispered in German, quick, low observations Thomas couldn't fully pass. But he caught fragments, grosser, bigger. Their expressions shifted subtly, not relief, recognition, something they had not prepared for despite months of Wehrmacht collapse. Thomas marked her identification number on his roster, POW 86 4. He did not know that within days this woman would restore a captured cipher machine no British technician could repair. He did not know her expertise would intercept hostile transmissions before they coordinated attacks. He noted only that her hands, visible as she gripped the lorry frame, showed calluses consistent with technical work rather than domestic labour. Camp 2226 operated under standardised procedures, roll call at 08 Uhr, medical inspection by Augustin III, assignment processing through midday, confinement protocols by evening. Thomas's assignment differed from standard guard rotation. Command had designated him technical oversight, captured enemy equipment and communications storage. Translation: he maintained confiscated German radio equipment used for interrogation intelligence. His mechanical background, years repairing Seafire wings and Swordfish torpedo plane systems, qualified him for work most guards found tedious. When he reviewed intake documentation, one notation stopped him. Beside Frieda Köhler's name, special expertise, Funktechnik Kurzwelle, shortwave military communications, uncommon specialization, particularly among auxiliary personnel. During processing, he asked her directly, "You worked signals until the end?" She answered without hesitation, "Yes, until the British crossed the Elbe." Her voice carried no defiance, only factual acceptance. Thomas studied her more carefully. Her hands showed wear patterns he recognized: tool abrasion, wire cuts, the specific callousing that came from adjusting frequency knobs under operational pressure. Not trained, experienced. She had worked inside active Luftwaffe communication networks during their collapse. "Ever operate a Telefunken T52 cipher link?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. Her eyes snapped upward, surprise evident. "You have one?" He did not answer. Behind her, other women exchanged glances, sensing technical conversation, but not comprehending its significance. For Thomas, this moment shifted context. She was not simply a prisoner, she was a technician, someone who understood signal propagation, circuit architecture, frequency allocation, the invisible language that had connected the Wehrmacht's collapsing command structure. Camp regulations forbade unnecessary interaction between guards and prisoners. Sergeant Reeves's voice cut across the intake area, barking orders. The exchange ended. As Frieda was led toward the women's barracks, she glanced back once, not with fear, with the recognition of someone who had just met a counterpart, someone who spoke her professional language across the divide of victory and defeat. Thomas signed the intake card with one additional notation: recommend technical labour assessment. By mid-September 1945, Harperley held 263 male German POWs, 37 newly arrived female auxiliaries, and 42 British military staff. Regulations governed every aspect of camp life. Orders, printed in black ink and posted in each barracks, specified prohibited activities: no fraternization, no private conversations between guards and prisoners, no physical contact except during medical procedures, no access to tools or equipment without armed escort, lights extinguished at 21 hours. Silence, however, carried information. The women observed movement patterns, identified which guards avoided eye contact, noted who carried authority with confidence rather than aggression. They mapped the camp's rhythm as they had once mapped enemy radio frequencies during the war. Frieda, assigned to Barrack 4B, became a quiet focal point. Other women approached her with whispered questions. Is it true the British won't separate us from the men's camp? Do they know what we did during bombing raids? Will they punish those who served near flak batteries? The unspoken fear beneath each question. Will they discover who we really were? Frieda deflected inquiries with controlled responses. She had learned during years of Luftwaffe service that fear propagated faster than accurate information. Thomas spent the afternoon in the equipment shed, repairing British No. 18 field radios used for perimeter patrol communication. Static crackled from corroded speaker coils, moisture damage from Durham's persistent fog, routine work. Yet his thoughts drifted back to the intake line, to a woman who recognized a Telefunken T52 designation on hearing, who understood specialized cipher equipment most Luftwaffe personnel never encountered. For the first time since VE Day ended combat operations, he felt something beyond numb routine: curiosity. At 18:45 hours, a dispatch arrived via motorcycle courier. Thomas signed for the sealed envelope and read its contents under the shed's single electric bulb. Incoming equipment delivery, confiscated German communication devices from Hamburg sector. Arrival estimated 14th September, requires technical assessment and secure storage. He folded the paper slowly. Something had shifted, not in the camp structure, in possibility. The lorry arrived at 04:30 hours on 14th September, headlights cutting through darkness. 2 wooden crates, German military markings still visible beneath Allied inventory stamps. Thomas supervised offloading while Sergeant Reeves smoked impatiently, rain beginning to slick the compound's gravel paths. Thomas pried open the first crate with a crowbar. His breath caught. Telefunken T52d cipher unit, used exclusively by high-level Luftwaffe command posts for encrypted strategic communications. Extremely rare. Intelligence value, exceptional, and comprehensively broken. Damaged rotor assembly, severed wiring harnesses, cracked motor housing. The second crate contained spare parts, mismatched components salvaged from multiple units, incomplete and poorly catalogued. Command would demand operational restoration. British intelligence needed functional German cipher equipment to decode intercepted transmissions and identify remnant resistance networks. But the British Army had no technicians trained on T52d architecture. None. Except one person in Barrack 4B. Someone who had asked 6 words that now carried profound significance. You have one? Thomas wrestled with protocol for 3 hours. Regulations explicitly forbade involving prisoners of war in technical repairs on enemy cryptographic equipment. Security, risk, substantial. Yet intelligence requirements outweighed procedural caution. The unit's chief engineer in London had included one notation in the technical manual Thomas received. If captured intact, these units require trained Luftnachrichten technicians for restoration. British personnel lack specialised knowledge of proprietary German cipher architecture, meaning technicians like Frieda Köhler. At noon, Thomas made his decision. He approached the women's barracks, Reeves following with visible skepticism. "I need POW 86214, Thomas stated calmly. Reeves scoffed. "You're joking." "No, and it's not a request." Reeves glared but did not override the order. Minutes later, Frieda stepped into the doorway. Her hair was tied back with scavenged string, her posture cautious but steady. Her eyes moved from Thomas to Reeves, assessing the situation before speaking. "What do you need me for, Corporal?" Thomas exhaled slowly. The decision had been made. The consequences would follow. A machine only you can fix. The repair shed smelled of oil, wet canvas, and cold metal. A single electric bulb illuminated the workbench where the Telefunken T52d sat partially disassembled. Frieda's breath caught when she saw it. T52. My God! She moved toward it instinctively, stopping only when Thomas spoke. "You touch nothing unless I tell you to." She nodded, no offense taken. She understood reality. She was a prisoner. He was her guard. But when she examined the machine closely, the technician in her took control. "Motor block is jammed. Rotor alignment is completely off. And this wiring... Who stored this? It's butchered." "Can you fix it?" Thomas asked. "Yes, but not with your tools." She listed requirements, items Thomas had not seen since 1944. Fine-gauge wire in 3 specific diameters, precision screwdrivers with insulated handles, an oscilloscope if possible for frequency calibration. "Do that with what you have," Reeves barked from the doorway. Frieda looked at Thomas instead, not Reeves. "With your permission, I'll try." Thomas gave a brief nod. The moment became strange, almost ceremonial. A British mechanic, a German signalwoman, a captured cipher machine between them. By sunset, Frieda had restored half the primary wiring harness. Her fingers worked with confident precision, never hesitating over circuit pathways or solder points. Thomas watched the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating, how she whispered numbers to herself, frequency values, coil resistance estimates, circuit load calculations, all internalized, all second nature. He realized something fundamental. This was not a woman forced into wartime service out of necessity. She lived inside signals. She understood electromagnetic propagation the way he understood piston compression and wing stress. 2 professional worlds, suddenly aligned by defeat and British mud. She stopped working only when Reeves forced her return to the barracks at evening roll call. As she left, she looked once at Thomas. "You're different from what we were told," she said quietly. Thomas met her gaze. "So are you." Word spread through Barrack 4B within hours. Frieda is repairing British equipment. The guards are using her skill. They need us. Those words carried weight. The women had expected humiliation, starvation, physical punishment. German propaganda had promised British weakness, gaunt soldiers, collapsing morale, a nation barely surviving rationing. Instead, they found structure, discipline, food better than they had eaten in months, and guards who treated them as human beings rather than spoils of war. The British guards defied every expectation. They stood taller than anticipated, moved with unshaken confidence, maintained discipline without cruelty. Their authority felt different, earned through victory rather than imposed through fear. In whispered nighttime conversations, the women shared observations. "I thought they would hurt us. They look so confident. It frightens me more than anger would. They speak calmly, but their orders are absolute. They are nothing like what Goebbels told us. They're bigger than we expected. Not merely in physical stature, in composure, in the quiet, unshakable way they carried victory. In the professional respect they extended even to prisoners when skill warranted it." Frieda listened but contributed little to these discussions. Her mind remained elsewhere, on a cipher machine in a cold shed, on circuit pathways waiting to be restored, on a young British mechanic who treated her not as a captured enemy, but as a fellow technician with expertise worth recognizing. That night, lying on her narrow bunk, she stared at the barrack ceiling. Around her, women prayed quietly. Others wept into folded blankets. 2 whispered about homes they might never see again. Frieda thought about transmission frequencies, about rotor alignments, about the strange reality of enemy soldiers who asked for help rather than demanding submission. Outside, guard tower lights swept across the compound in steady intervals. Rain tapped against the roof. Somewhere beyond the wire a generator hummed. And in the repair shed, a German cipher machine waited. Broken, but not beyond restoration. 3 days later, the Telefunken T52d erupted in sparks. Thomas slammed the power switch down, cutting current. Acrid smoke rose from the motor housing. Frieda stared in horror. "I told you! These parts don't match. Someone forced incompatible components into the chassis. This is sabotage or complete incompetence." Thomas knew she was right. The machine had been transported through half a dozen Allied sectors during its journey from Hamburg to Durham. Every sector had probably assigned curious technicians to examine it. Each one had likely damaged it further through ignorance of its specialized architecture. Command needed the unit operational within the week. Intelligence reports indicated increased covert radio traffic in the British occupation zone, possible remnant Wehrmacht cells attempting to coordinate resistance activities. The T52d represented their best chance to decode intercepted transmissions. Thomas made a decision that would trigger reprimand if discovered. "Frieda, come in earlier tomorrow before roll call," she hesitated. "That violates your regulations." "Yes," he said simply, "but we're running out of time." For a long moment neither moved. Rain hammered the shed's tin roof. The smell of burnt insulation hung between them. Finally she spoke softly. "Then I'll be there." That evening a British field radio crackled with an urgent message. Thomas was present in the communication room when it came through. Possible German guerrilla cell broadcasting near Lübeck. Intercept required for coordinate triangulation. Request immediate frequency analysis. They needed decryption capability fast. Only the Telefunken could process the captured transmission bands using proprietary German cipher protocols. Thomas felt pressure surge like physical weight. He paced the communication room, he cursed quietly, he waited for morning. But Frieda did not wait. At a 3:14 hours, she quietly slipped from her bunk, avoiding the boards that creaked, stepping past the woman who prayed nightly, past the woman who cried into her blanket, past 2 others who whispered about home. She dressed in silence and moved into the fog outside. A guard tower light swept past her. Frieda froze mid-step. Boots crunched on gravel behind her. A shadow emerged from the fog. A voice. "Thomas, you're early. You asked me to come." "I didn't mean in the middle of the night." "You need the machine operational, yes?" "Yes," he admitted. "But if anyone sees you, then walk beside me," she said simply. "Like you're escorting me to assigned labour." And so, under the heavy glow of guard tower lights, Thomas walked beside Frieda across the foggy compound. To any observer, it appeared entirely proper, a British corporal escorting a POW to early labour assignment. He kept his stride even and authoritative. She matched it exactly. 2 silhouettes crossing darkness bound by technical necessity. They reached the repair shed at 3:22. Thomas unlocked the door. Frieda stepped inside, rolling up her sleeves, and said the words that would change everything. "Let us begin." The next hours unfolded as concentrated motion. Sparks flew from soldering points. Coils were rewound by hand. Wires were traced through damaged pathways and rerouted. Heat radiated from the machine's motor housing as systems came online section by section. Frieda soldered broken circuits with surgical precision. Thomas calibrated the motor block, adjusting tension screws incrementally until the rotor assembly finally spun with steady mechanical rhythm. The Telefunken T52d came alive at 5.22 hours. A low rumble, a flicker of indicator lights, the distinct click, click, click of cipher wheels engaging properly for the first time since its capture. "It's working," Frieda whispered. But the moment of triumph lasted only seconds, because as the paper tape began printing decoded fragments of intercepted transmissions, a message emerged. Coordinate transmissions. 1343 Kreak C. Sender. Unknown. Region. British zone. Hamburg. Frieda stiffened. "That's not Lübeck." "No," Thomas said, reading the tape. "It's inside our sector." They exchanged a look. Fear. Urgency. Immediate understanding. This was not routine intelligence gathering. This was an active signal from a remnant cell operating inside the Allied occupation zone. And the only reason they had intercepted it was because Frieda Köhler had broken every camp regulation. Thomas lifted the paper strip, reading the final line printed in mechanical type. Operation Red Wind, awaiting clearance. By 07 hours, word had spread through the guard barracks that a corporal had been seen escorting a female POW across the compound before dawn. Rumours accelerated. Sergeant Reeves confronted Thomas immediately after morning roll call. "What the hell were you doing with her at that hour?" "Working," Thomas said flatly. "Don't lie to me." "Check the intelligence logs." Reeves paused. He did. When he saw the printed signal intercepts, complete with timestamps and coordinate data, his expression shifted from anger to confusion. But accusations had already reached command. Major Harris demanded a formal inquiry. Regulations were explicit. No unauthorized movement of prisoners outside scheduled labor assignments. Frieda was isolated in a holding room and interrogated for 3 hours by intelligence officers. Did the guard coerce you? Did he request inappropriate favors? Did you sabotage the machine? Did you send that signal yourself to implicate British security? She answered each question quietly and without deviation. No, no, no. I repaired it. Because he asked for technical assistance. Because your intelligence service needed it operational. Thomas was forced to stand before Major Harris and 2 other officers to justify every action he had taken. The interrogation was thorough. His service record was reviewed. His mechanical expertise was noted. His judgment was questioned. And though he did not regret the repair, the intelligence value was undeniable. He regretted exposing Frieda to this scrutiny. She had saved them. She had provided actionable intelligence that might prevent coordinated attacks, and now she might face punishment for cooperation. The irony was not lost on Thomas. Major Harris reviewed the overnight intelligence logs in silence. The paper tape lay on his desk, coordinates, frequencies. The phrase, Operation Red Wind, underlined in red pencil. Outside, morning light broke through Durham fog. Major Harris delivered his decision at midday in the camp's administration building. Corporal Aldridge, you violated established protocol. You acted without proper authorization. However, your actions produced actionable intelligence regarding a hostile transmission network operating inside the British occupation zone. Command deems your judgment situationally justified. Thomas exhaled slowly. Then Harris turned toward Frieda, who stood flanked by 2 guards. POW 86214. You will not be punished. Your technical cooperation is now classified under intelligence protocols. You will continue working on captured equipment under direct supervision. Direct supervision, meaning Thomas. The room remained silent. Then Harris added, his tone measured. Your contribution may have prevented hostile operations targeting British personnel. That does not make you an ally, but it does make you valuable. Frieda lifted her chin slightly. I understand, sir. Yet something shifted in her expression, something Thomas immediately recognized. Pride. Not in Germany, not in victory or defeat, not in ideology, but in the simple, fundamental truth. Her skill mattered again. Her expertise, cultivated through years of Luftwaffe signals training, had value beyond surrender. She was not merely a prisoner, she was a technician whose knowledge served a purpose larger than imprisonment. Over the following week, Frieda worked daily on intercepted transmissions. She identified frequency patterns, advised on German code procedures, explained the operational habits of Wehrmacht signals units during their collapse. Not one guard looked at her the same way afterward. Some regarded her with suspicion. Cooperation seemed too convenient. Some viewed her with respect. Her technical ability was undeniable, but all regarded her with awareness. She was not like the other prisoners. The women in Barrack 4B noticed the change immediately. Is it true you helped them? Do you trust the British now? Do they trust you? Frieda always answered truthfully. I don't know, but they treat me like I exist, like my work has meaning. That's more than the Wehrmacht gave me in the last year. The women whispered again at night, their words carrying different weight than before. They're bigger than we expected. This time, the phrase held no fear, only realization. The British had not hurt them. They had not starved them. They had not mocked their surrender or humiliated their defeat. They worked with prisoners when military necessity required it. They enforced regulations firmly but without cruelty. They carried themselves with the unshaken authority of victors, but without vindictiveness. One woman, A former Luftwaffe auxiliary who had helped aim anti-aircraft batteries spoke quietly one evening. "I expected wolves. We were told they would tear us apart." Another woman, younger, responded, "Maybe we were the wolves. Maybe they're just tired soldiers who want to go home." Frieda listened but offered no commentary. She knew better than most that reality rarely matched propaganda. On 28th September, Thomas brought her a new assignment. 3 additional transmissions had been intercepted, all using variants of the codes she had helped decrypt. Red Wind was not a single cell, it was a coordinated network. Frieda worked through the afternoon, cross-referencing frequency patterns, identifying transmission signatures, isolating probable geographic origins. By evening, she had produced an analysis that British intelligence forwarded to occupation headquarters. The network was dismantled within 2 weeks. 3 fanatical holdouts from a disbanded Luftwaffe signals regiment were arrested attempting to coordinate sabotage operations targeting Allied supply depots. Their operation failed because of a Telefunken T52d cipher machine, because of a British mechanic who recognised expertise regardless of nationality, because of a German signalwoman who refused to let broken circuits remain broken. On her final day at Harperley, Thomas handed her the last decoded transmission log. "Your work saved lives," he said quietly. She folded the paper gently, treating it with the care of something significant. "I only repaired what was broken. You did more than that." For a long moment neither spoke. Rain tapped against the shed's roof. The Telefunken sat silent on its workbench. Then Frieda said words that had once been whispered in fear but now felt like acknowledgement. "You are not the enemy I expected." Thomas smiled faintly. "And neither are you." Winter came early to County Durham in 1945. On 14th October, Frieda boarded the transport that would take her and 36 other women to repatriation processing centres in the British zone of occupied Germany. Snow drifted across the compound as they assembled in formation. They were thinner than soldiers, worn by war and captivity, but they stood taller than when they had arrived in September. Thomas watched from the camp gate, clipboard under his arm. He had signed the release documentation that morning. Standard procedure. Expected outcome. Yet something felt incomplete. As the lorry's canvas doors were secured, Frieda looked once at Harperley camp, at the wire fences, the watchtowers, the British guards standing silently in falling snow, and the man who had seen her not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as a technician with a mind worth respecting. In her lap sat the final strip of decoded tape, the last transmission from the Red Wind network before its collapse. A message with no sender, no recipient. Just one printed line. End of transmission. She folded it slowly as the lorry pulled away, its engine noise fading into winter silence. Britain receded behind them, but the truth remained, carried forward in memory. They had met their captors, and found them to be bigger, stronger, kinder, more professionally disciplined, more fundamentally human than years of propaganda had promised. The gap between expectation and reality had been vast. Propaganda had painted British soldiers as weak, desperate, barely surviving. Reality delivered guards who maintained order without brutality, who recognised expertise regardless of uniform, who treated prisoners as human beings capable of contribution. The women carried that realisation forward, into repatriation, into occupation, into whatever uncertain futures awaited them in a Germany divided by victors. And in the repair shed at Camp 2226, the Telefunken T52d sat silent under a canvas cover, a machine that had connected enemies through shared technical language, a cipher device that had proven expertise transcends nationality. On the 3rd of November 1945, British intelligence filed a classified report regarding signals intercepts in the northern occupation zones. One paragraph read, "Technical cooperation from captured Luftwaffe personnel resulted in successful identification and neutralization of remnant resistance network designated Operation Red Wind. 3 arrests concluded operation. Recommend continued evaluation of specialized POW expertise for intelligence applications." The report made no mention of names, no mention of a corporal who violated protocol, no mention of a German signalwoman who worked through night fog to restore a broken cipher machine. Only results, only numbers, only operational conclusions. Thomas Aldridge returned to civilian life in January 1946. He resumed work as a mechanic in Portsmouth, repairing engines and fixing what others broke. He never spoke publicly about Harperley Camp. He kept one item from his service, a strip of decoded paper tape carefully folded, marked only with coordinates and a single phrase, "End of transmission." Frieda Köhler's post-war life remains largely undocumented. British repatriation records show she was processed through Hamburg in November 1945 and released into the British occupation zone. No further military records exist. What is known? She survived. What is recorded? Her technical expertise contributed to intelligence operations that prevented attacks on Allied personnel. What endures? The recognition that skill, expertise and professional respect can transcend the boundaries drawn by war. Camp 2226. Harperley closed in 1948. The wire fences were removed. The barracks were dismantled. The land returned to County Durham farmland. But the Dang Ives preserved one thing: intake logs, repair records, intelligence reports. Documents that show how 37 German women arrived expecting cruelty and found discipline, expecting humiliation and found structure, expecting enemies and found soldiers who valued capability over nationality. The final entry in the camp's log, dated 2nd March 1948, contained only administrative closure language, but attached to it was a single note, handwritten by an unknown clerk. Records complete, equipment dispersed, personnel relocated, no incidents of significance reported. The file closed without comment. The numbers had already told the story.